In today's Rambam, Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah, Perik Zayin, Halacha Aleph. The Rambam tells us, begins the parakim that deal with Nevuah. Dr. Rambam, Yesodei Hadas, from the Yesodis, from the foundations of this Das, is Leida Sha'akel Menabe is Bnei Ha'odam. To know that the Eibishter gives people Nevuah. Ve'ena Nevuah Chola Ella Al Chochem Godel B'Chochma. Nevuah is only Chal on someone who's a Chochem Godel B'Chochma. Giber B'Mideisav. Godel b'chochma, gibber b'mideisav, le'ye yitzrei misgaber olav b'dover ba'elam, elahum misgaber b'daiti al yitzrei tomid. So the Rambam is talking about the tenoim for a novi. He says a godel b'chochmas, a gibber in his midas, which means that he's always in control of his Yetzer Hara. Baldea rechava nechena ad ma'id. A baldea, a broad baldea, which is nechena ad ma'id. A person who's filled with all these midas, and sholim begufa, he's sholim complete in his guf. Kishi kanis lepardis, when this person goes into the pardis, and he gets involved in these high yonim, etc., etc. So this person, miyad ruach hakodesh sheira olav. I mean, I skipped a few lines. But that's the Toichin. So basically, the Rambam gives a couple of Tanoim for a Novi. And it's Seichel and Midas. He's a Chochem Godel, Gibber B'Mideisav. He's in control of his Yetzer Hara. He has a big Baldeya. Those are the Tanoim. And then he says, Odam Shumimula B'Chol HaMidas Ha'elu, a person who's filled with these Midas. And he's a Sholim B'Gufei. So then, if he does whatever he has to do, so then the Nevuah will be Sheira. That's how the Rambam tells back the Tanoim of Nevuah. It's interesting, this concept of Sholim B'Gufei. First he said the Tanoim were all in Seichel and Midas. And then he says, so a person who has these Midas and he's Sholim B'Gufei, so then if he learns and whatever, he'll be a Novi. So Sholim B'Gufei is an additional thing. It's not one of the initial Tanoim. The initial Tanoim was the Chochma and the Midas, Misgaber al Yitzrei, Baldei Rechava. And then he says, and if you have all those things and you're Shalom B'Gufei, etc. What's this Shalom B'Gufei? What exactly does it mean? Where does it come from? Why is it important? It's not one of the Tanoim, but then he says, if you have all the Tanoim and you're Shalom B'Gufei, and he goes on. So it's interesting. I live in Chicago. When I came here a number of years ago, 20 years ago more, so there was a Yid here. His name was Rabbi Yitzchak Sender. He was a Rosh Yeshiva in the Skokie Yeshiva, and we were very friendly with him. He came to our Yeshiva, to Lubavitch Yeshiva a few times. He gave shiurim for the Bachrim. He wrote a number of svarim. He's writing the Elamems. So he wrote a number of svarim. One of them is about a whole sefer on the Inyan of Nevuah, called it Machazei Elyin. A whole sefer on the Inyanim of Nevuah. So there he deals with this Inyan, with this Shaila, and he says it's not. There's no such makir in Gemara that a Navi has to be a Sholim B'Gufei. Where does the Rambam take it? He brings from a sefer called Be'er Royi, from a Rav Refoil Eliyahu Yitzchak Alevi Katzenellenberg, Simon Samach. And this sefer brings from Agorin Reb Yitzchak Yeruchim Diskin. He says an interesting thing. He says Rashi and Chumash Pashas Lech Lecha, when the Eibusha tells Avram Avinu, Hishalich lefonai v'heyei tomim. So Rashi says from the Medrash, Hishalich lefonai b'mitzvahs mila, u'badover hazeh tia tomim. Shekol's man sha'orla b'cha ata balmum lefonai. So the Eibusha tells Avram Avinu that you should have a bris, then you'll be a tomim, because otherwise you're a balmum. So he teaches that, and what's if Avram Avinu is a balmum? Marash, it wasn't a kohen. Elamai Avram was a novi, and to be a balmum, you have to be shalom b'gufei. And he says furthermore, so you do the Shaila, the ganze Welt, the Shaila why Avram didn't take a bris till he was 99 years old, till he got the tzivui. After all, he was mekayim kol ha'teira kula shaloi nitna. So he says, because before there was a tzivui, then fakert, making a bris would make him a balmum, because heyes, there's no tzivui. So Mela Orla is not a problem. So having a bris would make him a balmum, so he wouldn't be able to be a novi. Now I'm giving you a tzivui for bris milah. So now fakert, now having the Orla makes you a balmum. Take it off. So he brings this as an interesting makir, that to be a novi, you can't be a balmum. It has to be shalom begufim. That's what he says. Obviously, it's a sharp word, but to say that that's a makir and halacha for the Rambam, that the Rambam was machadash from his own das based on that medrash from Avraham Avinu, that the reason is mitzad the nevuah of Avraham Avinu and the bris milah was the moon. L'chur is zeir shver to believe that that's like a pshat, pashup pshat in Rambam. Yeah, he brings another makir that the Rambam says in Hilchas Deis, which we're going to learn shortly in Perek Dalet Halacha Aleph. Hoyil v'hayes haguf bori v'sholem midarke Hashemu. When the Rambam there talks about the all in Yonim, that a person has to be healthy. The Rambam says, "Sharhi efshir sheyovin a yeda dover midias abeire v'hu chayla." That's the lashon of the Rambam in Hilchas Deis. That it's important to be healthy, to have a guf bari v'shalim, because otherwise you can't know anything midias abeire when you're sick. No, that's over here also. Hey, yes, you can't know about midias abeire, so you can't learn and you can't think, so you can't become a navi. Maybe that's what the Rambam means shalim begufi. And again, where's the makir for this Rambam? So this Rambam is based on another Rambam that God says later. You know, the Rebbe taught us a little bit in the Klolim of Rambam that the Rambam doesn't not say on what he's going to say later. So we don't know this yet, that Shalom Begufe helps have a Yediyah Sabere. So the Rambam nevertheless mentions it here as a Psadavar HaPoshut, that in addition to the Tnoi HaNevuah, it has to be Shalom Begufe. Where the Rambam got this and what it means and why it's so necessary. So I want to say a vart, b'derech efsher, miyusud an abir nifla of the Rebbe in the earlier Tnoim that the Rambam says over here. It's a whole sikha. It's a sikha in Chilik Chav Gimel, Behaleischa Gimel about the Tnoi HaNevuah, and the Rebbe tells us tak on this Rambam, and the Rebbe says dvarim nifloim, which I'm not going to say now ba'arichos at all, just mamish the nekuda that's negel in your name. We read that first the Rambam says the Tnoim to be a Novi. And basically he talks about Chochmah and he talks about Midas, his Gabrus and Midas. The Maisa is in the Gemara there's a list of needs. The Gemara says in Nedorim, Nedorim Daf Ches, Rabbi Yechanan in HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mashra Shchinasei Ela al Giber v'Oshir v'Chocham v'Onov. The Kulan Mimesh, that to have Ashros HaShchina, one has to be a Giber, and an Oshir, and a Chocham, and an Onov. And the Gemara learns them how Moshe Rabbeinu was a Giber, and how he was an Oshir, and a Chocham, and an Onov. So the Shaila is, the Rambam over here, the only one he really mentioned was Chocham. Giber, Oshir, and Onov, he doesn't mention. So even though the Rambam says Giber b'midesov, but in Pashtus, that's not what the Gemara means, because the Gemara brings Rayat to Moshe Rabbeinu's Gevura that he was a Giber b'gashmias. He held the Luchis. So really, the Rambam only mentioned Chocham from the Tanoim that the Gemara said. The Gemara said Giber, Oshir, Chocham, and Onov. The Rambam mentioned Chocham, but Giber, Oshir, and Onov he doesn't mention. Yeah, Al Derech said there's a Gemara Masechta Shabbos. There it says Chocham, Giber, Oshir, and Bal Koima. Someone who's tall, a Bal Koima. Of course, the Rambam doesn't mention Bal Koima either. So the Shaila is, what happened with the Tanoim of the Gemara that the Rambam doesn't mention? So the Kesef Mishnah over here deals with it, and the Kesef Mishnah says that the Rambam holds that the Tanoim that the Gemara mentioned is only to have Nevuah B'Kvius, based on a Rosh. And the Rambam is talking about someone to have Hashras, Hashchina, Hashras, Nevuah, not B'Kvius. So for that, you don't need all these Tanoim. The Rebbe is not Makabel. The answer, where the Rambam doesn't say here, he's talking about not B'Kvius, yeah B'Kvius. Fakert, the Rambam should tell us what the halach is for Navi B'Kvius. The Rebbe says that the answer, the Kesef Mishnah is a L'chur Nish Glati. It's a difficult answer. Then the Rebbe brings an answer from other Mefarshim that they say that the Rambam doesn't pass like that Gemara. You know, that Gemara says all those Tanoim for Nevuah, but the Rambam holds it's not so because there's rayas from other Gemaras that a Navi or Ashras Hashchina doesn't require so many these in Yonim. The Mashal, he brings the Gemara, talks about the Baskel, Yeshkan Echot Shiroi Shetishul of Shchina, and they realized it was Hillel, and Hillel was a big Oni. Aklaponis, so the Rambam had Mekairis from Gemaras that these Tanoim are not necessary. So maybe he doesn't pass like that Gemara. And the Rambam just says that you need to be a Chocham and a Giber b'Mideisav, and that's all. That's another approach. Says the Rebbe, maybe. But then why doesn't the Rambam mention Onov? Fakert, Onov is definitely necessary. By Hillel HaZaken, that was the big reason why they said he was the one who was Roy Shetishur of Shechina. So maybe we're still missing. Why doesn't the Rambam pass at least the union of Onov? Why doesn't he mention the union of Onov? The Rebbe goes on, again, I'm being mamash mekatzer. The Rebbe says maybe you could say that Onov is nichlal in Giber b'midoisov, because, you know, being an Onov is part of having good midas. And then the Rebbe says, already, maybe also the union of Ashir, the union of Giber is Nichlal when the Rambam said Shalom Begufay. In part 2, as we said earlier, the Rambam first says the Tanoim, then he says if you have the Tanoim and you're Shalom Begufay, so maybe Shalom Begufay already means Giber. Says the Rebbe, no. So first of all, Shalom Begufay, who says it means Giber? Doesn't mean Giber. He's healthy, but not a Giber. Secondly, even so, it's not in the actual Tanoim. It's only, as we said, first the Rambam says the Tanoim, and then it says, if you have that and you're Shalom Begufay, if this would mean Giber, should have been in the actual Tanoim. So Mamela, we're left with the Kasha. The Rebbe is left with the Kasha in the Sikha. Why doesn't the Rambam mention all the Tanoim with the Gemara? Why doesn't the Rambam mention Giber? Why doesn't he mention Oshir? Why doesn't he mention Onov? Why does the Rambam only talk about Chochma and the Inyan of Midas? And here the Rebbe says the Biur. And then the Teichna Biur is that this Rambam is not here to tell us all the ways to become a Navi. The Rambam began, the words of the Rambam were, as we read earlier, that it's Yesodei Hadas Leida Shakil Manabes Bnei Ha'adam. The Rambam is teaching us why Nevuah is a Yesodin Das. It's a Yesodin Das because we have to know that the Eibishter could be misyachid with the seichel of a person, of a human being. That's the Yesodin Amunah. That's why it's one of the Yud Gimel Ikrei Amunah. The way the Rambam says in the Ikrim also. That it's a Yesodin Amunah to know the Eibishter could be mischaber with the seichel of a person. Ebazei says the Rebbe, the only Tanai that the Rambam brings is the Tanai that's negea to this Yesodin Das, the chibur of the Eibishter with the seichel of Adam. And that's that the person should be a shalom b'chochma, baldei rechova, and his misgaber al yitzrei. Those are negay that there should be this chabrus of the Eibishter with Adam. This that there's other tanoim, he has to be a gibir and ashir. Those are protim. That in order, the Rebbe brings the orders from Iran, from a Marsha, in order for the Navi to be listened to, the people should respect him. So he has to be wealthy, he has to be strong, he has to be a Balkoima. These are all details, protim. They're not negay to the Seid and Das that the Eibush is mischaber with a person. And that's why the Rambam doesn't mention Giber and Oshir and Balkoima, because they're tanoim that this gaver, that this person needs in order to carry out his nevuos. But it's not the gedder of nevuah. The schabros of the Eibishter with a person, and the Rambam is telling us the gedder of nevuah. Why doesn't the Rambam mention the Tanai of Onov? Says the Rebbe, because Onov has nothing to do with nevuah. That's a general Indian that if a person is not an Onov, there can't be any kesher to Shechina b'chal when a person is a balgaiva. So the Eibishter is misrachik with him. So it's not a din in nevuah. It's a din in a kesher to the Eibishter b'chal. So what does the Rambam talk about? The inyan of Shleimus HaChochma, Shleimus HaSeichel, and Shleimus HaMidas, which that enables the Eibishter or the person to be mischaber b'daite with the Eibishter, and that's Yesodei Hadas Shakil Manabe Bnei Yodam. Azay Zokter Rebbe in the Sikha, and it's a beautiful beer, it's masbir. And the Rebbe said the Rambam is not arguing with the Gemara. No, the Rambam is not saying the Gemara's Tanoim could all be correct Tanoim. Of course, you have to be a Giber and an Ashir and a Balkema, but those aren't negate. That's some gather of Nevuah, and you say the Amunah of Nevuah, and that's why the Rambam doesn't mention it. As they learned the Rebbe in the Msikha, and the Rebbe is Meirechel for that. The Rebbe answers Akasha the Ikrim, and the Rebbe is Miyasher to Gemara. So again, and anyone who wants, give him ayin, of course, in the Sikha and Chelech of Gimel Balei Chagim. Nasil in Yonenu, after the Rambam says the Tanoim of Nevuah. Talks about the Shleimus HaChochma, it talks about the Shleimus HaMidas, which all of that is the Yesod of the Nevuah. And then says, so when a person, Adam Shememula B'chol HaMidas Elu, and he's Shalom B'gufei, so then B'chol. Kamin Afshar Matzia Zayin. What does this Shalom B'gufei mean? This Shalom B'gufei is Miramis or Kailul, all those Tanoim that the Gemara says that the Rambam didn't say in the Tanoim Nevuah. In other words, the inyan of Gvura, and the inyan of Balkema, and the inyan of Ashiros. That these are all inyanim that the Navi also needs in order to be a Navi. They're not the get to that some gather and Nevuah. And that's why the Rambam doesn't put them in the Tanoi HaNevuah. Because the Rambam wants to tell us the Tanoi HaNevuah. But before the Gemara said that the Navi has to have certain inyanim in order to be a Navi. So that Rambam Shalom B'gufei. In other words, B'neisef to the inyanim haruchni, ha'ikri, ha'yesedi, the seichel and the midas of the person. He also has to be a shalom b'gufei. Efsher, maybe it's a stretch. Shalom b'gufei here doesn't mean just gufei hagashmi. It means in all the gufni is the shleimusim. The shleimusim that are gashmi is the shleimusim. What are the shleimusim that people see in this world? The shleimus is gvura, is balkema, is ashirus, and they're also negeya. At al-tznoim, Again, not to know him in the Iker Gedre of Nevuah, but they're a necessary chelik of being a Navi, like we said before, so that people should listen to them. If this is true, is very, very reich. Where the Rambam gets this from? Fakert. This is what the Gemara says. The Rambam Taki doesn't mention the Tanoim like the Rebbe explained to us because it's not negated to the Etzem Geder. So Mele, he doesn't put it as part of the Etzem Geder. But on the other hand, the Gemara said Kama v'Kama in Yonim that are necessary to be a Navi. So like the Rambam main word that benasif to all the Yonim that are negated to the Iker Mehus of Nevuah, which is Bika in the Seichel and Midas and his Gaber Salah Yetzer, when he also is Sholem Begufe, which means, according to the way we're touching, perhaps, which means Sholem in Yonim Agufnim and the Gashmi is in Yonim. In the Gvura, in the Ashirus, and the Balkema, so then he can go ahead and be a Navi Lepel Mamish. Weiter and fragen, but what happened with Onov? The Rambam was not Meramas Onov. So I'll go back to what the Rebbe said. Onov has nothing to do with Nevuah. Onov is an Inyan Kloli B'chlal. To have a Shaykhis and the Eibusher, which the Rambam is Meidrich also in the Sefer, that how Balgaiva is the worst thing in the world. But Onov is not a tonight that's kosher to Nevuah, as the Rebbe explains in that Sikha. So that the Rambam is not even Meramas over here. Mashenkin, the other Tanoim that are yes negeh to Nevuah, but they're not the Etzem Geder or the Muhus of Nevuah, as we said. So after the Rambam says the Tanoim, he says you also need Sholem Begufe, which perhaps might mean these Pratim and Ebazeh. It's straight out of the Gemara what the Rambam was being Meramas with these additional two words.